The Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences has been racking its brains about how to air the Oscars now that they've forced comedian Kevin Hart to resign as host because of something that outraged somebody somewhere over something. I can't remember what. According to a statement issued by Academy President Shirley Whiteman to the two junior high school students he was having sex with, quote, "We've managed to damage a black man's career, so that's proved how virtuously politically correct we are. But now we need to hire another comedian who can make jokes without offending anyone except the sort of clueless, brainless middle Americans who made this country great so we could live off the fat of the land by making movies no one wants to see and then giving each other awards for them," unquote. Trying to find a more inoffensive host than Hart, the Academy has so far auditioned a white noise machine and a wind-up bunny rabbit, but has recently begun to consider putting on the show without any host at all. In a statement issued through his ecstasy supplier, Whiteman said, quote, "Not only will we have no host, but we're considering doing the entire show without any audience as well. That way it would look more like the movies we'd be honoring and would make a statement about the fact that modern audiences simply are not woke enough to understand such small but beautiful films as Snakey, the tender story of a teenage transgender who decides to cut off his penis and turn it into a hand puppet, or Midnight Blue, the Syrian expose of how a bigoted police force imprisoned a sensitive young man just as he blossomed into homosexuality after slaughtering his mother and father in their bed," unquote. Whiteman says if the new Oscar show without any host or audience is successful, Hollywood will consider staging the award show without actually making any movies, just to see if anyone notices. Trigger warning, I'm Andrew Klavan, and this is The Andrew Klavan Show.
I feel hunky-dunky, life is tickety-boo. Birds are winging, also singing hunky-dunky-doo. Ship-shaped, tipsy-topsy, the world is zippity-zing. It's a wonderful day, hurrah, hooray! It makes me want to sing. Oh, hurrah, hooray! Oh, hooray, hurrah!
In the book of Deuteronomy, God tells the people, "I have set before you life and death, blessing and curses. Now choose life so that you and your children may live." But there's at least one guy who says no thanks. A professor at Clemson University says human extinction would be sad, but might improve life on Earth. Humans should just lie down and die and make things better. In a rambling and poorly reasoned op-ed in the New York Times, a former newspaper, this Monday, Professor Todd May suggested it might be sad but not bad if future generations of humanity simply weren't born in order, of course, to save the Earth. Now, that a stupid opinion should appear on Monday in the New York Times simply proves that it was Monday in the New York Times. But the particular babbling chain of thought involved in Professor Todd May's death-loving reasoning exemplifies almost every trend of philosophical thought on the left, from the love of transgenderism to the subjugation of art to politics, and a very weird but telling practice called Kafka trapping. We're going to talk about all that, but first, Ben Shapiro has announced his latest book, which I have read. It's very good, The Right Side of History, How Reason and Moral Purpose Made the West Great. It's a fantastic read, as I know, and you can pre-order your copy online at any major bookseller. Do it. It's good stuff. You know, the lousy bum, brings out his book exactly the same time in March as my novel, Another Kingdom, is coming out. But this is nonfiction, so you can enjoy both The Right Side of History and also Another Kingdom, which you can also pre-order, and you'll get all kinds of toys and pictures and stuff for your phone. I bet Ben's not giving that stuff away. Go to anotherkingdom.editorsexclusives.com, and you can pre-order that too. All right, I got to take a look at this article. I know it's been around. People have been talking about it, but I've been waiting to talk about it, and this is the first time I've really had a chance. This is an article that was said, would the extinction of humanity be a tragedy? And he dithers around a lot about what he means by tragedy and the fact that it would be our fault. But here's basically, let me read you the two sections that says what he has to say, and then I want to talk about why this reasoning is central to the right, and it links up with another very important article that came out in Quillette. He says, "Let me start with a claim that I think will be at once depressing and, upon reflection, uncontroversial. Human beings are destroying large parts of the inhabitable Earth and causing unimaginable suffering to many of the animals that inhabit it. This is happening through at least three means. First, human contribution to climate change is devastating ecosystems, as the recent article on Yellowstone Park in the New York Times exemplifies. Second, increasing human population is encroaching on ecosystems that would otherwise be intact. And third, factory farming fosters the creation of millions upon millions of animals for whom it offers nothing but suffering and misery before slaughtering them in often barbaric ways. But cooking them in very tasty ways, I should add. There is no reason to think that those practices are going to go away anytime soon. Quite the opposite. Humanity, then, is the source of devastation of the lives of conscious animals on a scale that is difficult to comprehend. Now, a lot of these environmental problems, of course, would be solved if the professor just stopped reading the New York Times, because this is where most of the problems exist. You know, I mean, we do make a mess of things before we clean things up. Human beings do make messes before we clean them up. We created the London fog. You may, if you've read about that in books, there was a London fog that you could, pea souper they used to call it, that you couldn't see through. They got alternate forms of burning, of heating rather than coal, and the London fog went away. LA used to have a green smog that would roll in, all that, and make it very, very difficult to breathe. Catalytic converters solved that. Human problems are very often solved by human beings inventing new stuff. I would guess that we are not far away from ways of storing solar energy and wind energy that will make those forms of energy useful as they are not right now. All right, but he is dealing with the torment that is inflicted on animals by the mass creation of food, you know. And by the way, let me just say that while I want to solve this problem last, after I solve the problems of human beings, I mean, as long as a child is suffering on Earth, I care about this much more than a goat. But I do believe we could treat animals better. I will say that. I think animals could be treated better. More important that we eat and love and laugh and be merry than that we do that. But I do think that it is something on the list of things that we are going to have to do, that we're going to want to do eventually. But he says, nope, there is just too much torment wreaked upon too many animals and too certain a prospect that this is going to continue and probably increase. It would overwhelm anything we might place on the other side of the ledger. Our own science is revealing the richness of the lives of our fellow creatures, that they have consciousness and have complex emotional relationships with each other. And this ironically gives us a reason to eliminate our own continued existence. In other words, because we are harming other conscious creatures, we should eliminate our existence. Now, he says, one might ask here whether, given this view, it would also be a good thing for those of us who are currently here to end our lives in order to prevent further animal suffering. Should we kill ourselves? Although I do not have a final answer to this question, he says, I guess we can all count ourselves lucky. Otherwise, we might open the door and Professor Todd May would be outside with an axe. But he says, I do not have a final answer to this question. We should recognize that the case of future humans is very different from the case of currently existing humans. I love the New York. You know, I read the New York Times every morning just for the satire. It says, to demand of currently existing humans that they should end their lives would introduce significant suffering among those who have much to lose by dying. In contrast, preventing future humans from existing does not introduce such suffering, since those human beings will not exist and therefore not have lives to sacrifice. The two situations are not analogous. This guy is like a cartoon character in some takeoff on academics, but here he is in the New York Times. He says, it well may be then that the extinction of humanity would make the world better off, and yet would be a tragedy. It's a tragedy because it's our own fault. See, our tragic flaw was that we are doing these terrible things. I don't want to say this for sure, he says, since the issue is quite complex. It's quite complex whether we should all die or not. But it certainly seems a live possibility, and that by itself disturbs me. Again, the fact that the New York Times is running comically stupid philosophical op-eds is not news, right? It's the New York Times. It's the op-ed page. It's, you know, it's Knucklehead Row, that there's another knucklehead involved. It should not surprise us. But it's important because of the way he's thinking and why he's wrong. And in the middle of this article, he kind of flirts with some of the reasons why he's wrong, and he dithers about them for a while. But here's the thing, okay? Every value that he's talking about is a human value and would cease to exist without humans to notice it. The idea that consciousness is a good and suffering is a bad is a human value. The value of other people's, of other consciousness, of animals' consciousness is a human value. The lion that rips the throat out of the antelope does not give a crap about the antelope's consciousness. That, to value another creature's consciousness, is a human value. No humans, no value. We give that value. We bring that value with us. This is why God had Adam name the animals, because we create those values, because we can put them into words, and in words we can explore their meaning and create values. Just to know consciousness, just to want consciousness, just to avoid a truck coming at you is not giving value to something or giving meaning to something. You have to have language to do that. So when you say, would it be good for us to die? The question is, good for whom? If we weren't there, the goodness of our dying would be erased, right? Any good that would come of our dying would be there. Good and evil, human values, things that we see on earth, that we create and we understand. Now, some of you are saying, well, wait a minute, what about, I mean, really, to pause for just a minute, the only important thing about the earth, when people say we must save the earth, Gaia, our Mother Earth, the only important thing about the earth is a rock. It is a piece of rock floating in the vastness of space, spinning around a star just in the right place to support life. The only thing important about that rock is life. The only thing important about life is human consciousness. Why? Because it gives value to everything. It is the thing that gives value to everything. All right. Now, some of you may say, well, wait a minute, what about God? And that, of course, is exactly the question. When we see these values, when we see the value of another consciousness, are we seeing something that's there, or are we creating that value? Is it just valuable to us? Now, I would say we're just discovering that value. The value is there, but we are discovering it. The reason it's there is because God sees that consciousness as well. Obviously, this professor doesn't think that, because if he saw that the value of the other animal's consciousness was absolute, he would also see that the value of our consciousness is absolute, and the value of the consciousness of generations to come is also absolute, because that also exists in the mind of God. He is reasoning without God. Now, what happens when you reason without God? And because there is a God, and because things only make sense with God who exists, right? When you remove him, in order to reason at all, in order to speak at all, you have to put something back in its place. What does Professor Todd May put in its place? He puts himself. He puts the idea that his reasoning about this, his thinking about this, is somehow important enough so he can destroy anybody who could think the way he thinks and reason the way he reasons. His entire conversation would vanish off the face of the earth. Now, what does this have to do with leftism? For this, I want to turn to another article that was in Quillette by a fellow named Connor Barnes, who was a former anarchist, right? And he talks about what it's like to be in an anarchist community. He says, commentators have accurately noted how social justice seems to take the form of a religion, right? When you eliminate God, the world makes no sense. Simply to reason, you have to put something in the place of God. You can put your own conscious, there has to be a consciousness there. You can put your own consciousness. That's what most people do. They put their own consciousness, but you got to put something there. So he says, social justice seems to have the form of a religion. This captures the meaning and fulfillment I found, Connor Barnes found, in protests and occupations. It also captures how outside of these harrowing festivals, everyday life in radical communities is mundane, but pious. As a radical activist, much of my time was devoted to proselytizing. Non-anarchists were like pagans to be converted through zines and wheat-pasted posters rather than by Bible and baptism. When non-radicals listened to my assertions that Nazis deserved death, that all life had developed into spectacle, and that monogamy was a capitalist social construct, they were probably bewildered instead of enticed. Deep and sincere engagement with opposing points of view is out of the question. You know, last night I had a dear friend over the house, and he's a liberal. We got into a discussion. We found so much in common. We found so much between us that we agreed on, including his dislike and rejection of identity politics, of silencing people, so much that we agreed on, even as we disagreed on who the good politicians were and what the good policies were. But if you're a radical, deep and sincere engagement with opposing points of view is out of the question, says Connor Barnes, because it has replaced God. Radicalism is like a clan, too suspicious of outsiders to abandon cousin marriage, and like incestuous offspring, radicalism's intellectual offspring accumulate genetic load. Escape from the paradigm of suspicion is hindered by Kafka trapping. Okay, and I'm going to come back in a minute and talk about Kafka trapping, because this is something I've noticed. I've actually spoken about it before, but I never had a name for it before, and I love this name from the writer Kafka. But let's just pause for a minute, because Connor Barnes was on with Tucker Carlson and spoke a little bit about what his life was like and where all of this led him. And let's listen to that for a minute.
What was your view of violence?
So violence, there's a shifty way people talk about it. Direct action and diversity of tactics, which is a subtle way of saying, if somebody wants to be violent, we're going to turn our head and be okay with it.
So it's not a nonviolent movement?
No.
Huh. How did you get into it?
I was a pretty unhappy teenager, and I'm told that happens a lot to teenagers, and I went looking for an explanation, and I ended up just reading a lot of radical literature and found more and more radical literature until I found things that explained that happiness wasn't something you had much control over. Capitalism was keeping you down.
So he gets into he got into a circular argument, and the circular argument was based on and worked through this thing, Kafka trapping. Now, I'm sure most of you know who Kafka was. He wrote these really wonderful and excruciating novels, one of them being The Trial, in which a man is charged with something. He's never told what. He's never told how he can address the charge. It's kind of like being investigated by Mueller. You know, the charges come out, and the charge is the charge, and the asking about the charge is part of the charge, and you just find yourself in this bureaucracy. And Kafka was predicting and noticing the bureaucracy that was going to become the hell of the 20th and then the 21st century. So Kafka's characters were in this trap. So Kafka trapping is the idea that opposition to a radical viewpoint proves the radical viewpoint. And I'm sure you've heard people say this. An example of this is a woman says, being a feminist just made me miserable. And they say, well, that's because you've been convinced by the patriarchy to be against your own interests, right? So the fact that you are against feminism proves feminism's point, okay? Where does this come from? And Connor Barnes continues and writes about this. There is an overdeveloped muscle in radicalism, the critical reflex. It is able to find oppression behind any mundanity, any normal thing. Where does this critical reflex come from? French philosopher Paul Ricoeur famously coined the term school of suspicion to describe Karl Marx, Friedrich Nietzsche, and Sigmund Freud's drive to uncover repressed meaning in text and societies. Today's radicals have inherited this drive by way of Foucault and other Marxo-Nietzscheans. Now, this is wonderful stuff because a lot of it comes from Nietzsche, okay? So let's talk about Nietzsche just for a minute. Nietzsche said that without God, there can be no objective morality. So all that's left is to find what he called the genealogy of morals, where morals come from, to analyze them. The word analyze means to take things apart, okay? So to take apart our morals and examine them and look at them and go back and see where they go, because there is no objective morality without God. Both Karl Marx and Sigmund Freud were dedicated to despiritualizing things that had been spiritualized before. So Karl Marx, not to get too deep in the philosophical weeds, but he said, I'm going to turn Hegel on his head. Hegel wrote a book which is really hard. I read it. It's almost incomprehensible, but it's a book called The Phenomenology of Spirit, on how our spirits develop. Marx took that theory and took the spirit out of it and made it all about money. Going back to feminism, you hear Marx in feminism when they say, oh, women, it's unfair. They don't make as much money when they stay home and take care of the kids, as if money were the only thing life was about, okay? Freud did the same thing with Christianity. Freud took Christianity and he based it all on sex. So instead of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, you had the id, ego, and superego. All the things of Christianity were sort of recreated as based on our erotic impulses. And So again, without God, without the Spirit, there's nothing left to do but analyze, but take things apart. The people who do this today are guys like Jonathan Haidt, Yuval Harari, Steven Pinker, maybe it's Jonathan Haidt, Steven Pinker, and sometimes we like these guys because they say conservative things, but we should be really careful with them because their reasoning is always materialist. It's always, if I take this apart, I get here, I can get here, and if I can create an evolutionary story about this form of morality, then this form of morality is useful. The problem with that is when it becomes useful to kill babies, when it becomes useful to create human beings and just use their body parts for other richer human beings, they will do that as well. Without the idea of the Spirit, without the idea of God setting the rules, you're going to get lost in that world. And it may be fine. It may make everybody happy, and it'll still be an atrocity. Here's the thing. The physical world is infinitely analyzable, infinitely take-apartable. You can take it apart forever. You can break everything down into smaller and smaller bits. And so you can always find some injustice. You can always find something wrong. Oh my God, they're playing Baby It's Cold Outside. Every tradition, every convention, everything that we do. Oh my God, you married a female, a man married a woman and had children. Oh my God, a capitalist construct. The fact is, the beaten path in a free society is usually the best path unless it's not, right? The beaten path is there because people chose it again and again. They chose it in a free society because it worked for them, because it was good for them. So following the beaten path is usually the path of wisdom. Now and again, you look up and say, oh, here's a terrible injustice that has to be fixed. Let's leave the beaten path or broaden the beaten path and do something new. Here's a situation that doesn't work anymore. Let's enlarge it. Let's turn the path a little bit. But normally, on a normal day, the beaten path is the right way. This is why leftists are always taking it apart, because they don't believe in the Spirit. The thing about the Spirit is not analyzable. Think of it like this. A car can be taken apart. The experience of driving a car is a whole, right? You can't take anything out of it or it stops. When a car breaks, you have to take it apart and put it back together. When a car is working right, the experience is all you need. Right? You don't need to take the car apart when the car is working properly. Most of the time, the beaten path is working properly. Most of the time, our traditions are in place because people chose those traditions again and again. The car does not need to be taken apart. What the left gets wrong is always a question of spirit. It is always removing the spirit, the wholeness of life from life, and being left with nothing left but materialism. It is again and again. And ultimately, what you come down to is, why live at all? Life itself can be taken apart and analyzed until there's no purpose to it, and the life of an animal is more important than the life of a human being. And this is why in Deuteronomy, God said, I have put before you life and death. Now choose life so that you and your children may live, and that you may love the Lord your God, listen to his voice, and hold fast to him, for the Lord is your life. That's why it says that, okay? And that's why the left is so wrong about this, and so wrong about destroying every tradition they can lay their hands on. There's nothing wrong with including new people in our traditions. There's nothing wrong with including new traditions that help out excluded groups. But there is something terribly wrong with disassembling the traditions of the majority that have lasted and served us so well. I'm Andrew Klavan. This is The Andrew Klavan Show.
Okay, so thing that I hate, number one. So Jack Phillips of Masterpiece Cake Shop is just getting destroyed by the state of Colorado. It's disgusting. So there's some vindictive piece of garbage human who's decided they're going to go into this Christian baker shop, and they're going to ask him to bake every offensive cake they can think of. So they've already asked him to bake a cake for a same-sex wedding, and he said, no, I can't do that because I'm a Christian. And then they sued him, and he lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court sort of said, well, he gets to bake whatever cake that he wants. It's artistic expression. But the ruling was very narrow. So now they want to drag him back into court because what they want to say is that he's still discriminating. What the Supreme Court said in the first case is that he's not allowed to discriminate, but the state of Colorado also can't be discriminatory in how it applies the rules, and obviously they had animus for this particular guy. So what the people who are going after Jack Phillips now want to do is allow the state of Colorado to show no animus but punish Jack Phillips. So now they're doing the same thing. The same jerks are coming back to Jack Phillips' bakery, and now they're asking him to bake a gender identity transition cake. He's a religious Christian, and he says, no, I won't do that. So now the state of Colorado is cracking down again on him again. Honestly, this is a fascist mindset. You got to make people do what they don't want to do, or they're bad people. And this is the local news reporting on it.
Colorado baker who won a victory in the Supreme Court when he refused to bake a cake for a gay couple on religious grounds has a new legal battle on his hands. The Colorado Civil Rights Commission recently ruled that Jack Phillips had discriminated against a transgender woman. They say Phillips refused to bake a cake for the woman who wanted one with blue frosting and a pink interior.
The commission has made it clear that it is intent on punishing Jack Phillips. Other cake artists are allowed to decline messages that they don't want to communicate, but when Mr. Phillips does it, they come after him.
Okay, so the problem here is not a double standard. So I know that the lawyers are making the case that it's a double standard because that's how the Supreme Court ruled. The real problem here is no baker should be forced to bake any cake they don't want to bake for any purpose. Okay, that's what freedom is called. I don't believe the federal government or the state government should be forcing people to engage in business with people they don't want to engage in business with. I know that's a controversial position because people say, okay, what about racists who don't want to serve black people? Or what about anti-Semites who don't want to serve Jews? And my answer is, go to a different bakery then. Those people's businesses will fail because people will rightly say, I don't want to shop at a cake shop that won't serve black people or won't serve gay people or won't serve Jewish people. Okay, this is where the free market comes in. Freedom of choice involves allowing people to choose to do things you don't like. And if you don't believe that, then you might want to re-examine your assumptions about how wonderful you are as a human, because somebody could come along and try to force you to do something that you don't like. The sword cuts both ways.
What's going on? If you've been under an internet rock for a couple days, about 5 or 6 days ago, Sargon, who's a big YouTuber, has about 800,000 subscribers. He's been doing it for a long time. Was banned on Patreon. Now, quickly, for those of you that don't know Sargon at all, Sargon, when I started years ago, let's say 5 years ago, when I started really realizing that something was rotten on the left, and I saw how that was so connected to free speech, and then I saw the rise of these social justice warriors who were hysterical and wanted to silence everybody. And then all of this was leaking into what I saw was happening with the progressive movement. When I started talking about that on YouTube, everybody was saying, you've got to go talk to Sargon. You've got to talk to him. He is the guy that has been sounding the alarms on this thing. You got to talk to him. Anyway, I did end up talking to him on his channel. And I tell you that because he was sort of the first one of the liberals that was like, guys, what's going on with us? We're not acting liberal anymore. And then, of course, that leads to everything that I've talked about over these couple of years, right? Like, the left is no longer liberal. The progressives have purged their free thinkers, and it's become an authoritarian movement that is against liberalism, which is rooted in the individual and live and let live attitude. Okay, so Sargon is not a nobody. He's not just some random YouTuber. He's actually been in the studio. I've interviewed him. His name's Carl Benjamin. You might be interested in finding it out. Eric Weinstein had an interesting comment on Carl that he told me the other day. He said he's sort of a blue collar intellect, which I think is actually a great compliment. It's like he's not a pure intellectual, like, that is studied at all of these universities for years and years and went on to become a professor and the rest of it, and published author, etc. But he knows these ideas in and out. But he's blue collar in that he's a regular guy. He's a bit of an admitted troll. He likes fighting with people online. He loves meme makers. He was sort of born out of Gamergate, all of those things. Okay. The point is, the guy is not a racist. And here's what happened. Or as far as I know, the guy is not a racist. But let me tell you why he got banned. He was banned because Patreon found a video a few days ago, from 10 months ago, from February of this year, on another channel, not even his channel, where he was being interviewed over audio with someone, and the guy's not a native English speaker, so there's a little bit of stilted conversation. And Sargon says the N-word. I think he says it at least twice. Now, he was saying it because he was trying to use the language of the alt-right against them. He was mocking their use and the way they think about certain people based on the color of their skin, okay? So I even said, so now let me back up for a second. So when I found out that Sargon got banned, I immediately texted Jack Conte, who is the CEO of Patreon. And I've had Jack in this studio, okay, right across from me, where this computer is, basically. He sat there. And that was when Lauren Southern was banned. And Jack Conte said that we do not ban people over speech. We ban people over manifest observable behavior. M-O-B, mob. You can't make that up, people. Mob. Okay, that's what they ban people over. Mob behavior. Irony? Yeah, what is that's not even irony. It's so ridiculous. It's not even irony. Anyway, he used my platform to say what his company's policy were, and they were not about banning people over speech. Also, he had made a point of saying, and it is in their terms of service, that it has to be an infraction that occurs on their platform. So in this case, not only did Sargon not say the word on their platform, it wasn't even on his YouTube channel that he's promoting for Patreon, right? It was on someone else's channel, a small channel with like 4,000 subscribers in this case. So this went against all the terms of service. They booted him without any warning and no chance of appeal or anything like that. And people are seriously pissed right now, and I get why they're pissed. I'm pissed. And on all the last 3 days, I mean, this basically, I've had a lot going on these last couple of days as I finally ended the tour with Peterson, although we're continuing again in the new year. But we taped like 5 shows in the last 2 days. We're finishing seriously strong for the end of the year. We got some great stuff coming. But this has taken every other moment of my life, because this is a direct, not only is it related completely to free speech and everything that I talk about constantly and what's going on with these platforms and these companies, but it's also directly related to my business. So just FYI, at the moment, we've lost about 500 patrons, and that's been, I think it's around $5,000 or $6,000 a month that we've lost. Now, most of the people have messaged me and said, "I'm really sorry, Dave. I love what you're doing. This has nothing to do with you. This is a stand against Patreon." Now, the funny thing here is that I'm actually, at one level, I'm very inspired that these people are you guys, right? You guys are just like, you know what? Fuck this. I can't take this shit anymore. We have known this is coming. These lines of what is acceptable and what's not acceptable keep moving and moving and moving. And Sargon, I don't know everything about the guy, but if this guy is the type of person that cannot be on a platform, then half the people I know probably can't be on a platform, and that may include me, and that probably includes you. So we keep letting these things move. Again, it doesn't matter what you think about Alex Jones, but you take out one. It's not like when they take out one person, they're like, we got one person, we're good to go. Let's pack it in, guys. Let's find a new hobby. It's like, oh, well, who can we keep moving? Who can we keep moving? Who can we keep moving? And the thing is, when I started my Patreon Hangouts today, so this is the day that we do the rewards, where I do these small Google Hangouts with people. Right before I started, you can look at my last tweet or 2 tweets ago, Vox, that awful steaming pile of poop that is Vox, which is funded to hundreds of millions of dollars a year, yet is obsessed with a couple of YouTubers, wrote a piece where they're calling a whole bunch of us, once again, the usual suspects, they're calling a whole bunch of us alt-right and reactionary right and the rest of it. And it's like, man, well, you keep doing that, and then eventually, why wouldn't these platforms boot us? So I have a vested interest in having this thing stop, because eventually it's going to come for me. And by the way, if you like the things I'm talking about, it's probably going to come for you too. So I'm oddly inspired on some level that people are kind of standing up and they're saying, we're not going to put our money to companies that don't support what we believe in, or at least respect free speech and whatever else. And then at the same time, I'm taking a business hit, so I'm not sure what to do. So let me just throw out just one quick little promo thing here. If you can go to Dave Ruben, not if you can, if you'd like to, go to daveruben.com/donate. You can donate there and keep the show independent. We are 100% independent. I am my boss. I am the CEO of this company. We have several employees now. The morning that this all went down, we just actually flipped one of our part-timers to a full-timer. I'm super proud of what we've built here. We've built a great community beyond just the conversations we're having, all of that. I've traveled the world this year and met thousands and thousands of you guys. It's all good. It's all good. And if you want to help us keep it independent and you're not happy with what's going on Patreon, you can go to daveruben.com/donate. You can do a one-time donation or a monthly donation, PayPal, credit card, doesn't matter. Okay, so that I just wanted to say that because a lot of you guys are asking me. I spent the last couple of days really, really, really trying to figure out what to do about this. I wrote a statement that I almost published where I was going to announce that I was leaving Patreon. I was going to do something nuts. I mean, a normal person in business doesn't voluntarily kiss 65 or 70% of their monthly revenue goodbye. But I was going to do it because I really thought, like, we're not going to get many more of these moments. You know what I mean? It's a little bit like, you don't want to swing too early when something's happening. You don't want to swing too late. You want to swing right at the right moment, but we don't know when that right moment is anymore. These bans and these shadow bans and algorithmic nonsense, it all seems so arbitrary and ridiculous that we don't know when it is going to happen. You know what I mean? Like, it's very possible that right now there's a Google engineer watching this right now going, oh man, I hope he will just slip up and say something, say the word that Sargon said so I can give him the boot too. I mean, we just don't know what the hell is going on here. But I do know that the CEO of Patreon sat in my studio and said, this is about behavior and these are about things that happen on the platform. And either he changed or he lied to me or he doesn't know what he's talking about. And I'm not even making this up to throw Jack Conte under the bus. Being a CEO of one of these companies probably sucks. And every day you're just under assault from social justice warriors who want to destroy another human being. And by the way, this is permeating society at every level right now. The Oscars can't even find a freaking host because they had Kevin Hart and then apparently he said faggot and now he can't host the Oscars. I mean, everything is just nonsense and drivel, and we must stand up against it. And I think you guys are getting a little bolder in standing up against it. I meet people who are starting to get more engaged. I think people are realizing it's coming to all of our doorsteps if we don't do it. And again, as I say every freaking week, I'm just some guy. I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm not a superhero, but we've got to get better at this. We've got to get better at organizing and fighting this. Anyway, what I've realized is it would not be wise or make any business sense to just kiss 70% of my revenue goodbye and hope that a whole bunch of people are going to go and donate on my site. There's a lot of things I want to do on that end to fix things. But what I would say is at the moment, if we can migrate as many people from Patreon and new people over to daverubin.com/donate, it will give me the leverage I need to do what I think is right. That being said, what you can do it or not do it, it's all good either way. We'll figure it out. And I'm not sitting here like cry me a river. I want to solve this problem. And I can't get into all the conversations I've had about this, but many of the people that you know and admire who are friends of mine that have been on the show and all that, they're thinking about what to do too. Like everybody is. I think I can say that much. Everybody is realizing this is a escalation of this. That if we let this guy go down and we don't make anything of it, it's not about him specifically, but if we let another person go down who doesn't deserve to go down, it's coming, and it's getting bolder every time because nobody stands up to it. So we got to start standing up more. So I'm happy.
We are at the water's edge of the argument that mainstream Christian teaching is hate speech. Because today we've reached the point in our society where if you do not support same-sex marriage, you are labeled a homophobe and a hater. So what's the next step after that? After they've done going after individuals, the next step is to argue that the teachings of mainstream Christianity, the catechism of the Catholic Church, is hate speech.
Now that the government has enshrined gay marriage, the next step is going to be going to religious people and telling them they have to engage with same-sex weddings. They'll be made to care. A man will come to your house with a gun and he will tell you that if you do not cater this wedding, they were forced to pay a $175,000 fine for not catering a lesbian wedding. There's a bakery across the street. You know, this is really nefarious stuff.
We are the LGBT movement, and we shall, no matter what, get our way. If you choose to resist our movement, we will come after you. We will threaten your life, and it will be perfectly acceptable behavior to do so. We will threaten your children, and there will be no backlash towards us, no matter how vile. We may even physically hurt you if you disagree with the LGBT. You cannot be objective. You cannot be neutral. You must participate against your will. If you do not do what we want, we will come after your business. We will sue you, and we will win. We will boycott and protest and picket, attack, harass, debase, demonize, dehumanize, and destroy those who disagree with us. We will take away your business, and we will take away your finances. If you do so much as to donate money to causes that conflict with ours, we will destroy your career and make sure you're unemployable in the future, because we will protest whoever hires you. It will not matter how honorable your profession or career has been. You will comply with our demands, or we will destroy your livelihood. If you provide any financial support to legislation that we do not agree with, we will protest your business and demand that you also make equal contributions to our cause. We will not leave you alone until you do. It does not matter to us if you're religious. Your religion is bigotry, and you should repent. If you choose not to aid and abet our ways and actively participate in activity considered sinful to your religion, you will be attacked. You will be sued. We will not stop until we destroy your business. We will vilify you and use the most heinous verbiage to describe your thought crimes, to make sure that everyone knows how evil you Christians are. We will re-educate you so that you learn. We are right, you are wrong, opinions and religion enable bigotry, and so all freedom of thought and religion must be eradicated to ensure nobody disagrees with the LGBT. We will control your speech. We will choose the words you're allowed to use. If you wish to exercise your First Amendment rights to discuss your values and beliefs, we will disrupt you, scream at you, harass you, and prevent you from your freedom, and it will be okay because LGBT rights supersede everyone else's rights. Even celebrities are not immune. They answer to us as well. If they speak words we do not like, they will have to pay. They will lose endorsements. They will lose their jobs. If they use quotes from people that we do not approve of, they will be bombarded with our anger and forced to recant admiring someone that we do not like. No business is too big. Even if you do not actually discriminate against the LGBT community, but support a stance against ours, we will come after you. Any opinions that are in conflict with our opinions, we will work to have your business blacklisted. We will have politicians vow to stop your business from growing in jurisdictions under our control, because politicians answer to us. If politicians refuse to answer to us, we will have them removed. If you try to speak against us, we will use our minions in the media to make sure your voice is not heard. We will ban rhetoric against us. There will be no freedom of speech if that freedom is being used in any way that we do not like. We will not allow any material to exist that is advocating any resistance to our demands. We will have courtrooms overrule the Constitution and make sure that you learn that our agenda supersedes any rights that you used to have. Federal agencies will work on our behalf, and if they have to break the law to do so, then so be it. The ends justify the means. Even the highest courtrooms will warn you that your rights will be no more, and it will fall on deaf ears because no one dares to speak against us. All of our actions are justified. It does not matter how vile we get, the ends justify the means. We are allowed to be totalitarian, and it does not matter if everyone knows it. There is no point in criticizing us because if you do, any point you make will simply be labeled as homophobia and anti-gay hate mongering. We won't stop until you comply. We will destroy everything to your name, or you'll be thrown in jail. We will use the government to push our agenda against you and your children.
Your one concern, though, is that ultimately this will lead to the government forcing gay marriage on synagogues that don't want to have it or mosques that don't want to have it.
Yeah, not ultimately. Like now, in California, they've already passed laws that you have to teach same-sex marriage in public schools. The left has no endpoint. Their only endpoint is using the government as a club against you. So now that they've got gay marriage, it will go to, we're going to stop accrediting schools that don't teach gay marriage or hire homosexual employees.
We will use the educational system to do our bidding, to indoctrinate your children with our ideology. We will teach them that homosexuality is good and perfectly normal and natural in every way, and all those who oppose it are evil. Even though, up until modern Western progressivism, homosexuality was considered wrong and immoral by every human civilization that has ever existed, we will teach them that all the other ideologies are wrong. We are right, and your children will be taught that all of history is evil since gays were wrongly persecuted, and they now need to make amends and celebrate homosexuality, even if they don't quite understand it because they're just children. You will not be allowed to remove them from our indoctrination. If you object our indoctrination, we'll even have you arrested because the government, education, and the media and corporations all work for us. We will force your children to express their support for us or they will not be allowed to attain their education. If schools don't choose to push our rhetoric and vow their support, we will threaten the funding of their education. We will incentivize students to adopt our rhetoric because they may improve their grades if they do so. They will be forced to read our literature to learn that homosexuality is not immoral but Christianity is immoral for objecting to it. We will use money from both students and government to promote our agenda because educators have learned that saying no to us will create protests and everyone will know you're a homophobe. So you must comply or you risk to be publicly destroyed. You will give us what we want. You will not be able to keep your children away from us because we will be everywhere. We will brand the foods they eat with our colors. We will change the way they play games until we've surrounded them so much that they give in and accept our ideology over theirs or their parents. There is no escape. Government buildings will fly our colors proudly in recognition that bullying, totalitarian fascism still works if done right. Cities and counties will designate us days, weeks, and months solely to celebrate us. Even the White House will not reign red, white, and blue, but rainbow pride. You cannot keep your children away because we control the media as well. We will give them television shows so all know Christianity is horrible. We will make ridiculing Christianity even fashionable. We will not allow any media that portrays members of the LGBT movement negatively, because if you do, we will protest, we will boycott, and we will make a scene and let everyone know you're a bigot, because everyone knows that all LGBT are the friendliest, kindest, most caring, witty people on earth, and they shall always be portrayed that way on our screens, and if you don't portray them that way, you will be attacked. We will be celebrated in every form of media for all the good that we do, for we have informed Americans that they need to surrender their civil rights to us. Even our control over the media will be celebrated. We will give members of the LGBT community awards to recognize all the great they do for society. If we receive these awards over others that may be more deserving, over people that are actually out there helping people in need, you're wrong. Nothing is more important than our cause. So if you try to come and argue otherwise, that supplying 600 million impoverished Africans with solar power is more noble than mental illness, we will have the media attack you and let you know how dumb you are for not agreeing with us. We need these awards because we've been persecuted everywhere we go. We will show you that discrimination and hate towards LGBTs is not a thing of the past, but in the present. If we cannot find hateful facts, we will simply make them up, but that's okay, because it's more important that people know that we're the victims than it is to actually tell the truth. And that may not seem like it's right to make up stories of oppression, but we promise it is. They are the liars for telling you we're wrong, because as you know already, we are always right. Even science cannot escape us, for if science is published that does not shed us in a good light, we will force them to recant their research. If we have to falsify research, evidence, and polls, then it's worth it, because the ends justify the means. We will teach people that gender and sexuality are whatever they feel they are, and that it has nothing to do with science or biology. We will make it known that biology is misogynistic and that science needs a makeover. Even school children should be allowed to choose their gender before puberty, because no matter what gender they choose, they are correct, because gender is meaningless along with science. It does not matter what any scientist or doctor say, no matter how prestigious they rank. They are all wrong. We get to select what science or biology is or isn't, and you should shut up and listen. If criminals decide to change their gender, then they shall receive the operation, even if taxpayers have to foot the bill. Even though our lifestyle has dramatic health effects detrimental to us all, we will normalize it to make sure that everyone knows that we should continue promoting and applauding these actions and use more money to help the perpetrators, because we in the LGBT community deserve help for the history of oppression we have unjustly faced. So you may not speak of any negative health consequences. Even though it is a medical fact that the practice of homosexuality tends to promote the spread of disease, if we don't like or accept that fact, you can't say anything about it, and it's just too bad. It does not matter what needs to be sacrificed to get in our way. If our arguments for mainstream acceptance and tolerance for our homosexuality can also be made for polygamy, then so be it. If the same line of logic that we use accepts pedophilia, then so be it. If that same line of logic is used to normalize incest, then so be it. For nothing is off limits. There is no sexual act that is wrong or immoral. Everyone is allowed to be themselves and follow their sexual urges no matter where they lead. We will corrupt and morally confuse entire generations and coerce them to believe our delusion is truth, and that common sense and religion are discriminatory and hate. Since we've ruled that genders are not science and only a matter of feelings, we will work to rid the world of any gender separation. Even if it may put your wives, sisters, and daughters in harm's way, that's a price that's worth paying. Because even if women object, they will not speak of it. We have put fear in everyone else already, so they won't dare to fight against us either. If some work up the courage to say something, we will make sure they are charged with a hate crime for thinking of their own safety over our agenda. You will not be allowed to acknowledge different genders, no matter what biology says. You can try and resist all you want. You can try to point out the dangers or call out criminals already trying to expose the system. You can even put up 20-minute videos talking about all the peeping toms that have already happened in women's bathrooms by people posing as transgenders. Our media friends will not cover any of those stories, for truth and facts hurt our cause, because we don't actually care about women at all if they're not an LGBT member. Hence, why we've even gotten the rules of sport changed so that biological males can compete in the Olympics as women. And if it provides an unfair advantage to transgenders over women, then so be it. We will piggyback on the civil rights movement for blacks. We will let everyone know that not supporting the LGBT community is just like being a racist, which means if you don't support what we want, you are no better than a KKK Klansman.
First, do you believe that those who opposed slavery and those who opposed interracial marriage should not have had the law protect them and to ensure that both black and white people were able to drink out of the same fountain?
I do not believe race is the same as sexual choice. And I believe many people of color, not all, but many, take offense that you equate sexual choices with skin color. And that's very offensive to many people.
It was very offensive to me that you would equate my sexual orientation as a sexual choice. My sexual orientation is just as valid in my lifestyle as someone's color of their skin.
All sexual activity is a choice. All sexual activity. Nobody puts a gun to your head or my head and makes us do anything sexually. It is all a choice. If you're talking about inclination, that's another story.
Even though your race is determined by your DNA, your biology certainly is not. Even though homosexuality is based on behavior and race is an immutable characteristic and not a behavior, we will make sure everyone knows they're the same. We will impose this magic on you and you will openly reject settled science. You have no choice but to accept our perception as reality. We will brand those who are standing up for their constitutional rights, for freedom of speech and religious liberty as an official form of discrimination. And since your rights are now discrimination, all actions we have to take to stop your evil discrimination are justified. If we have yet to infiltrate and corrupt your lawmakers and judges in your stupid conservative states, and they try to defend your freedoms, if they try to stop us from not being able to sue you for not relinquishing your beliefs in order to perpetuate our goals, we will get those politicians that we own to blacklist your state and prevent government travel and protests of your stupid civil rights. We will make sure the world knows that we don't deal with people that disagree with what we decide is good. Your rights do not matter. If that doesn't work, we will rally all of the institutions we politicize to fight alongside us. We will use our control over entertainment to get musicians to cancel events in your state, because despite the sex, drugs, and rock and roll, these are the people who know morality better than anyone. If you still resist, and if the media scrutiny, celebrity musicians, and political blacklisting still don't work, we will bring in the cavalry. We will take sports and make them do our bidding just as all the others. We will get the NFL to threaten to take away the Super Bowl from states that defend the freedoms and liberties of its citizens. We will turn the NFL on the people and the Constitution and have them try to bully Americans into our demands. We will get the NBA to threaten states that will not succumb to our objection to basic scientific principles. Because even though biology says that men and women have different chromosomes, we will let everyone know that there will be no more XX or XY chromosomes. We're all the same. And all of science and biology are not factual but a field of opinions and feelings. And those who object to the way we demand science to be, we will do everything we can and try and hurt your economy and your people.
But it doesn't become a win if the economic backlash to North Carolina and Georgia is so severe that they wind up really harming the state.
If you try to point out that we're being hypocritical, that the NFL still does business in Georgia and that the NBA still does business in North Carolina, it won't matter. But that's not all. We will also get enterprises from all over to join our cultural cronyism and work to deliberately punish Americans for believing that they have rights when they don't deserve them anyways, because you don't have a right to discriminate. And since both science and Christianity are discriminatory against us, they both have to go, or else we will punish your economy. We will get enterprises to pull out jobs and refuse to operate in your region until that you admit that Christianity and science are wrong and evil because they're discriminatory. If you try to point out that Apple, Microsoft, Disney, Coca-Cola, and PayPal, the major enterprises using their economic might to coerce Americans to concede their freedoms and civil rights, are being hypocritical because those same major companies have no problem operating in countries like Kuwait, Singapore, and Dubai, which sentence cross-dressers to prison, or countries like Saudi Arabia that executes homosexuals, it will not matter. We do not care about hypocrisy as long as it's on our side. We do not care that it doesn't make sense. We do not care if things we are saying collapse under careful scrutiny.
If I told you that I was a woman, what would your response be?
Good for you. Okay.
If I told you that I was Chinese, what would your response be?
I mean, I might be a little surprised, but I would say, good for you. Yeah, be who you are.
If I told you that I was 7 years old, what would your response be?
Feel 7 at heart, then so be it. Yeah, good for you.
So if I wanted to enroll in a first grade class, do you think I should be allowed to?
Probably not. If that's where you feel mentally you should be, then I feel like there are communities that would accept you for that.
If I told you I'm 6 feet 5 inches, what would you say?
That I would question.
Why?
Because you're not.
So I can be a Chinese woman.
Sure.
But I can't be a 6'5" Chinese woman.
We don't even have to actually believe in the insanity we endorse, or if we're simply using the LGBT movement as a battering ram to destroy the last remaining obstacle, being religion, to grab complete power over the American people, it doesn't matter. We're allowed to be hypocritical because we're right and you're wrong. We do not care that we can have CEOs fired because they were against gay marriage. Anyone against gay marriage deserves their career being ruined, even though at the same time, Barack Obama said
that marriage is the union between a man and a woman. Now, for me as a Christian, for me as a Christian, it's also a sacred union. God's in the mix.
It doesn't matter, because Obama works for us now, and now he's telling you that your religion is obsolete, and you need to rid yourself of the disease of Christianity, because Christianity says gay is wrong, and we know that gay is right, so give up Christianity. If you try to point out the double standards in our methods, that bakeries can refuse to bake anti-gay wedding cakes and they can't be sued, but bakeries that refuse to bake pro-wedding cakes can be sued, it will not matter, because we are allowed to be hypocritical. If you try and expose us for how disproportionately hostile and militant we are when others give us a taste of our own medicine, nobody will care, because everyone else has kowtowed to us already, and thus they will never try and go against us because they don't want to feel our wrath. If there are members of the LGBT community that don't agree with us, we will attack them too. We will eat our own if they show any dissent from our opinion, even if we have given them awards for their courage to be transgender. You will accept our ideology no matter what. You are not even allowed to host or be friendly towards anyone who disagrees with us, or we will come after you, even if you're a member of the LGBT movement. We have no problem with hypocrisy, because the real motivation is hatred for Christianity, and we have the right and responsibility to tell everyone else how to live. We don't even have to hide our motivations. Your religious liberties mean nothing and should be abolished, and we can be very upfront about that. In fact, we will openly mock your stupid religions. We can be vile, we can circumvent any sense of decency, and in return, we will be given a platform to tell you how Christianity is stupid, bigotry, and wrong. We will decide what churches will be allowed to preach. It doesn't matter to us if it is not actually your religion, because Christianity is stupid, because it says we're wrong and sinful, so Christianity should be abolished. If you don't do what we say, we will sue your church and force its removal through endless litigation. You are entitled to your own opinion, but if you wish to express that opinion in any way, you need to run it by us first and make sure we approve. You only have rights that the LGBT community grants you. If you are Christian, you will be the ones now that have to hide in the closet, and by making you pay for your Christianity, by showing everyone that Christianity is bigotry and evil, we will destroy it. And if we just so happen to destroy all of the freedoms, liberties, and civil rights that Americans have in the process, then so be it, because the ends justify the means.
Because the problem is that once the state starts saying that homosexual marriage is on par with traditional marriage, now you get the problem of churches have to recognize homosexual marriages. Businesses have to recognize homosexual marriages. We're going to cram it down on you in your personal life if you personally disapprove. And that is a violation of both freedom of religion, freedom of association, and freedom of speech.